My name is James Anthony Barnhart. I am 47 years old. I'm going to be 48 next month. Woo! As you can see, I'm already gray, but I'm really handsome, so that's okay. Um, so, you know, um, my tale's a little bit of a hard one for me to talk about, but the more I talk about it, the better I feel. To begin my tale, um, in the beginning of my life, let's talk about my parents for a second. Um, my parents were pretty young when they got married, and it was almost like one of those old school like kind of weddings. And my mom had gotten pregnant on my birthday. I hear many different versions, well, all the same version, but different levels of details in my birth story. My mom's schizophrenic. Came out when I was 5 years old, and some years she is full of truth. Some years she has, a little bit of couth and doesn't tell me every little detail. So, my mom was 17 when they got married. My dad was 20, and along I came. My dad had been working and had gotten a job in San Diego, and he decided to he took a road trip to go out there, and he was going to get a home and get everything set up to bring my mom and myself out there. Now, on the way, he broke down in Indianapolis, Indiana. Uh, the thing with that is that became our home. My dad was one of 13. He was the youngest, the only son. He had 12 older sisters. My grandfather had two different wives to produce all these children because he wanted a son. He wanted a namesake, and that was gonna happen no matter what. Like, didn't matter. Um, my grandfather was not a good man. He came from evil. Maybe it's the best way to say it. Um, if we're gonna look into that with generational, my great grandfather started this lovely generational trauma chain, right? He abused all of his children. He had 14, and he abused every single one of them, whether it was physical, whether it was SA, whether it was emotional, verbal. This man was just pure evil. And when we go to family reunions, that's what we hear. So my grandfather was not a great man. He did a lot of horrible things. And that comes up later in the story. But we're going to get to my mom and dad. My dad ends up in Indianapolis, Indiana, which is where I believe his eldest, I think 5 sisters had lived. And his oldest sister, who was literally older than my mom's parents, owned a mansion in Indy. And she rented out the servants' quarters to us. And we lived in Indianapolis for the first 5 years of my life. Now, my dad was a very religious man. His mother, my grandpa's second wife, had come to the United States from Scotland as a Jehovah's Witness, and somehow he conned her into marrying him. And, he had his children with her, and he abused her, and ultimately that marriage broke, and they split, and he ended up marrying another woman. My dad's stepmom, who was just an amazing human being. But we ended up in Indy. And the whole thing with the religion is my dad fought against being a Jehovah's Witness. So when they got to Indianapolis, it didn't matter what form of Jesus that he got. He knew it just had to be. And being the fact that my dad is like me, I'm a survivor. I'm a recovering addict. I'm a gay man. He wasn't that, but who knows? He might have, he was something. Um, but he was a survivor too. And a lot of times when we have all that trauma, we will grasp onto God like it's the last thing we can do. And the sober side of him definitely did that. And at that point, my dad wasn't like horrendously bad with rugs and alcohol. Um, so we end up in Indy. He ends up in this lovely, lovely little group of people that others might know as the Children of God. Not the greatest cult. They are pretty well known for their childhood essay. And as my story opens, you'll see how that fit right in. We ended up there. And probably for the first 3 years of my life, we were within that church. And up until I was 3, my mom's dad showed up and told my dad he was going to stop, and that my mom was no longer going to be a part of that. And if he didn't, he was going to unalive him. And we ended up in a Baptist church after that. Not so great, still just as bad. But up until I was 3, I was probably an extremely energetic, rambunctious child. I was loud. I didn't let people bully me. I was just one of those in-your-face little tykes with so much energy. It was crazy. And that changed. At 3 years old was a lovely time when my uncle started showing me reel-to-reel movies. This was his way of grooming me, I guess. So they started with the movies. I don't know exactly how long it lasted. The memories and the visions of it are pretty clear. Thanks to EMDR, I've been able to reprocess a lot of this stuff and come to terms with it. But this was the beginning. First the grooming, and then we get into the first time I was assaulted, which was on camera. What I remember is my uncle had his bedroom set up with the camera at the end of the bed. And there was a man with a pillowcase on his head. And he was the one that was being filmed with me. And I knew the man. And his chest hair is how I knew who he was. The first man to assault me was my dad. And when it was done, my memories are of just being like a limp little doll, and him throwing me in the car, bawling his eyes out, and driving fastly. I don't know when he stopped, but when he did, he yanked me out of the back of the seat and pulled me up to him and cried. My dad didn't want to hurt me. He didn't want me to experience the things that he did. But when you're in a world like that, and it's not just, it's a world. It's a world. Blackmail and things like that truly exist, and people that assault you will force you to assault others, and those things go in big circles. My dad was the first. My uncle was next. My aunts, my dad's oldest sister, her stepdad was the one that followed. After that was my cousin, who was the star of the reel-to-reels that they used to groom me. This went on until I was 5 years old. And the big change that happened then was, prior to this, my mom's mental illness was not fully seen by others. The thing that kind of triggered it and pulled it was a situation where as kids, sometimes we bathe with our parents, right? And it's usually just innocent, whatever. My mom caught my dad doing something he shouldn't have been doing. And what I remember is her freaking out. And the next thing I remember after that is my dad was gone. My mom had filled the tub with scalding hot water, and she threw me in to clean the filth off of me. And this is when she had a break. And this led to maybe covered in burns, and my mom being put into a mental institution. We ended up coming back to Pennsylvania. They couldn't find a place in Indiana. So one night, my dad drove us back. By this point, I had a little sister. He put us in the car and drove us back. And when I woke up, I was in a different house. My parents were both gone. I didn't know any of these people. There was 3 children, a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And a woman that I didn't know but was my dad's sister. One of the younger sets that I probably hadn't seen since I was born. This is the sister out of my dad's that was right above him in age. She was the last girl that was born. She was also kind of like the mother figure of the whole family. Anytime anyone had a problem with their child, that child went and lived with her. I was there for about a year. In my first day there, I'd shut up. I was already in one of those states where, as a child, I was already in survival mode most of the time. And now I've been abandoned because no one explained to me where my parents went. And I'm in this lovely little area, in this lovely house that I don't know. And that first night, the 12-year-old decided that I was now his receptacle. And I shut down more. I was in kindergarten. I started wetting my pants. I'd completely stopped talking. The signs were there. And being the fact that, like, this was generational trauma, my aunt obviously just ignored these signs. Now, the lovely thing is her husband, the father of 2 of my cousins, the 2 younger ones, noticed something was wrong. And he paid attention. And he put a stop and pulled me out of the older kid's bedroom and put me in with the younger kids. And I don't know exactly what was said, but my older cousin was not allowed near me during that time. So things had stopped for a little bit. Where it gets a little wonkier is, this is in the 80s. Gardening and greenery is still illegal. and my uncle was a grower. During dinner one night, a helicopter came down, and the FBI came in and they jumped him and grabbed him up and took him away. And he went to prison for a while. Um, and after he was gone, and I don't know when this happened because time is all muddy. Um, and it's very muddy around this. But my aunt started having a breakdown. She had 2 kids that weren't hers. Her husband's gone. She has her own children. And my sister disappears while I'm at school one day. And I come back and I find out that my dad had came and got her. Now, this year that I was with my aunt, my parents never came to see me. Um, Nobody told me where they were, what was going on. All I knew was my mom was sick. That's it. That's all they ever told me. My cousin starts up again. And this continues until the day that my parents did pick me up. So I guess my sister ended up with my grandparents, my mom's parents, and my mom and dad came and picked me up. And it was very... The mom that I left and I last saw was way different than the mom that came to get me. Um, they weren't like, I don't think she got diagnosed with schizophrenia right off the bat, but they'd given her tons of medication, and she was kind of a zombie. And my dad takes me. I'm there with them for the summer, and by this point, I see that this is whenever I start to get to experience my dad being an alcoholic, and things got a little violent. Um, my dad would get frustrated because either my mom wasn't functional, she wasn't cleaning house, she wasn't making dinner, she wasn't watching the children. Basically, I'd started watching my own sister at 5 or 6, and he started taking his frustrations out on me, whether that was in a physical form or he started the things that made him cry that he had done to me prior, he had started doing on his own accord. And I just linked that to the booze, because from that point until I was 14, the only time he did that, he was intoxicated. And I don't know if that's what helps me rationalize it today. My dad's no longer with us, and I don't hate my dad, which I'm really surprised about. I don't hate him. But things got really intense, and we were in this apartment for probably like 6 months, like the summer. And in that summer, once a used child, other people start picking up on that, right? When they can see that you're broken, and they start doing to you what's already been done. And as a little kid, you start just believing that's all you are. First grade in that apartment, I still was not speaking at all. I didn't talk. I just didn't talk. And I was a chatterbox, and then I did nothing. I was wetting my pants every day at school. The school never said anything. I was never checked up on by children and youth or anything like that. I would go home and be afraid because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to be a situation with my dad. I didn't know if it was going to be a situation with a neighbor. I didn't know. And we moved. We moved halfway through that year and ended up in the town that I would call my hometown, which is where my dad grew up, Claysville, Pennsylvania. have no harm or no ill will, or scratch all that. Nothing holds me back from talking about that place, talking about the people, talking about any of it. We end up in Claysville. I start going to the Kingdom Hall with my grandma. I grew up a witness, which plays a role in my brain for a million other things. I did experience other churches, but primarily I grew up a witness. When we got to the hometown, we had many different phases of my mom over the years, and it was just a matter of how hard the medication was. Was she there? Was she not there? Did she end up in the hospital? She tried to unalive herself. From the time I was 5 years old until I was 21 was 117 times. It was a lot. One attempt right after the other. It's always in clusters, and she would get hospitalized for a little while, and then she'd come back. During all that, my older cousin started, visiting and doing what he needed to do for himself. My dad, on drunken nights, would also do that. And his dad had taken his role and started claiming me for himself as well. I was 9 years old when my cousin stopped. He was in college by this point, and it just didn't happen with him again. My dad stopped when I was 14. In that time, there was a lot of verbal, emotional abuse that was going on. I just hid. I hid everything. I lived in a fantasy world. I read books constantly. I was on a college reading level by the time I was in second grade. Maybe it's because of the autism. Maybe it's because of it takes you away from everything else that's horrible. In that time, I also made sure I protected my sister. There was no way in hell anybody was ever going to do to her what had happened to me. As a child, I was not allowed to spend the night places. I was not allowed to have friends over. The only places I could go involved family members. So I got to stay at family members' houses and things. Tried to be a normal kid. But there was not really any normal there. It was how can I pretend to be something so people don't know? Because as a child, I had already started realizing what my sexuality was, which I was afraid, because what do we learn at the Kingdom Hall? That Jehovah just doesn't love us, and that we will never have a chance to live in eternal paradise. I was afraid for my family to find out. I was afraid to be excommunicated, even as a little kid. And I never got baptized, which was a blessing. But it was fear. I wrestled my whole life. That's another thing. Thank God for that. Thank God for that. It released so much aggression. It allowed me to get out those physical frustrations that were just pent up inside of me.